everyone, this paper is about architectural structuralism applied to the problem of domestic space in the pandemic era. This paper is based on special ideas and solutions in Dutch architectural structuralism, on the review of numerous recent manuals and recommendations for the production of environments more resilient to a pandemic scenario, proposing at its end alternatives to spatial arrangements for contemporary dwelling. The structuralism is in architecture use the same codes and signs translated in spatial form as structuralist anthropology, carrying with it a humanistic understanding of proposing architecture and space. The theorist Siegfried Gideon was a member of CN, and in the decline of modernism he questioned its unilateral rationalism, being interesting to move on to another stage, which has the experience of space by the individual. Therefore, his proposal was to promote now architecture towards the problematic aesthetic of expression. He believes that true state of mind alternately shaped the cultural side of an apple, thinking and feeling. Thus it was an interesting time to rethink the architecture of the time. In parallel, Aldo van Eyck and Jacob Bakema, young members of CN, positioned themselves similarly to Gideon, as well as establishing a formal relationship with him. According to Sarah de Young article, the use of this youthful force has an initial factor speculated by Gideon to achieve the outlined goal. From the beginning, in the introductory speech at CN6, Siegfried Gideon can then be considered as an influential subject in the emergence of TNX and, consequently, structuralism. It is important to present this information because it illustrates essentialities that conceive structuralism, the strong desire to suppress modernist solutions, while trying to answer the same questions that created them. The difference is to answer these questions considering not only the rational, but mainly the human and experience. In this way, below are shown some of the key concepts of structuralism in architecture, which are interesting to be commented on, and which influence the work. For example, to understand users' interaction with space by allowing them to change such spaces their own way, to create space that allow for multiple interpretations by the user, to consider differences, not similarities, as design possibilities, to consider the territory as a unique fabric with specificities, and then employing these into the creative process, aiming toward spaces of strong character and open to adaptations by users. The Diagon House is a great example to demonstrate the possibility of spatial distancing between users and not social isolation, created through the variation of floor weights. The possibility of the house evolving together with the residents' their stories, besides the flexibility and freedom given to the users by creating a vertical circulation box and another wet area box, leaving the rest of the house free for the user to plan the way they want. This way, there is an opportunity for rich spatial associations. As a way of analyzing and proposing these and other design aspects, structuralist guidelines from the book Lessons in Architecture by Hermann Hertzberger are listed, since it is an interesting way of understanding structuralism at the same time as is proposed in contemporary times. Hermann Hertzberger defends the idea of public and private as correlated notions. They are territorial demarcations and spatial qualities that refer to the accessibility relationship between private property and the supervision of specific spatial units. Following the precepts of structuralism, there is a gap that makes a projectual complementarianism impossible, because spaces are created from the beginning separately, always only public or only private. The aim is to create this complementarianism, mainly through the user's experiences in the space. Hermann Hertzberger elaborates the idea of design pattern as a junction of disciplines: form, articulation, architectural motifs, and material, introducing a design order. The author also argues that if there is a good order, a unity of vocabulary and construction method is created. For this, the disciplines need to talk to each other, so that there is a unity of truth, or, in other words, a unified projectual language, identifiable as a whole. It is also said about the map of gradations. The gradations of territorial differentiations propose that the access aspects are important in the composition of users and uses. The idea of these gradations exists with a wider range by itself already demonstrates a more careful look in the creations of the project. Hertzberger proposed a map of the project's gradations as a way to intensify or attenuate force. Hertzberger exemplified this by speaking of the importance of the threshold as an intermediate element between areas of different orders, being a link between poles. As a way to stretch this property to the space, he proposed occupation spaces linked to projectual links. By proposing spatial gradations, indirectly spaces in between is also proposed, which do the equivalent work of portals, being between polar space, but which at the same time, as a space, curb the feeling of polarity between the surrounding spaces. It also says that occupation and structure are closely connected with the collective and the individual. The structure enables the creativity of the individual over the whole, acting as a basic mesh, like a weft of fabric, where the individual is the thread that will give color and texture, is the personality of the matrix. As an example, we have the Quinta-Monroy of Elemental, where a basic collective structure was created, where the individual from this one fills the void in his own way, each one in their free and unique way. In relation to pandemics, this is not the first pandemic. In the last century, they had three big ones, namely the Spanish flu, the Asian flu, and the Hong Kong flu, with the Spanish flu being a pandemic that killed 25 times more than First World War. We have a graph that is found on Information is Beautiful, where a lethality index versus contagion is reported. And this is possible to see how close the Spanish flu is to the COVID virus. Understanding the temporal distance of 100 years between these pandemics, and considering that despite great global health advances there is still room for the occurrence of pandemics, architecture is pertinent as an auxiliary discipline to curb this contagion and prevent future ones. In this way, some manuals were researched in 2020, some of them from architecture offices, others from architecture institutions, beside a Brazilian one as a way to interpret and bring to the analysis a national reading as well, totaling then 6 manuals. And here are the major axes, each one which is your strategy, totaling 33 health strategies. As an example, a bedroom space and how this guideline can be carried out in a very simple way in it, just with the fact there is the possibility of cross ventilation in this room that is independent from the other rooms of the house, and from there also implement natural light through the opening of the windows. And now there is a correlation between the sanitary and structuralist guidelines. The material guidelines was not used since it is better performed from project to project, and not in a correlation that brings hybrid guidelines that help in the projectual conception. Here are the 10 hybrid guidelines in the percentage of each sanitary axis insert in each one. As an example of axis is placed this one in which the cleaning routine is more dynamic and safe in people's day by day. In case a person passes in the corridor and there is some in his cleaning protocol to enter the housing unit, the simple fact of moving the chair, being protected by a shelf in situation 2, diminishes considerably the possibility of contagion in case this person who is passing by is contaminated. One can play this strategy through green zones inside the residential space, making these green areas tools in the variation of the circulation of the spaces, creating a social distancing that allows socialization. As an example, the residence that presents a potential for spatial expansion and retraction without the need for major renovations. It is the idea of the polyvalent residence being prepared for variations and change of the user, reality, and how the structure and occupation of this house being modulated enables modifications including the addition or subtraction of area. It is the living room that can be transformed into a bedroom, aid for visitors, or to give more comfort and infection control to a spouse who needs to be quarantined. It is the dining room that can become a green area for plants and biophilia, or a space for meditation and exercise. It is the residence that considers a certain number of residents, but allows for an increase in this number if the time is right. All this gives autonomy to the residents to make such change, only with the furniture, only the layout change. Here is a spatial demonstration for the isometric shown above. The use of hybrid guidelines for project design not only provides the opportunity for a differential architectural spatial quality, but also becomes a preventive aid for controlling future pandemics. Opportunizing this prevention since the conception of the architectural project gives the user time to protect himself in emergency situations. In the daily situations, it provides comfort and flexibility. By considering the possibility of adding or subtracting area from the housing unit, it also facilitates the change of use and user profile of the building in the long term, following the urban change of the surroundings. It is the residents that can come on Airbnb, co-living, or even a commercial room, because it gives basic spatial support for this through the way the housing unit is designed. All this taking into account the culture and specificities of the population, because it does not guide from predetermined constructive elements or generic spatial conceptions. Being humanistic, the guidelines consider the impermanence and mutability of space as a key factor, making the human being not only the unit of spatial measure, but also the reference of how and why such space is formulated. Thank you.